Welcome to Internet Radio. This is Barry Schrader from DeKalb County Life Online. Today's program is the 5th Annual DeKalb Area Agricultural Heritage Association meeting held on January 25th, 2016 at the DeKalb County Farm Bureau. The three people shown in the photos are at left, Steve Favor, an agricultural futurist speaking on innovations. In the center is Katie Pratt, who will be this keynote speaker, and at right, newly elected President Norm Larson. Now we'll hear Kara Pointer introducing our keynote speaker, Katie Pratt, who is the Ag in the Classroom Coordinator for Lee County. Her topic will be Feeding the World with Memories.
I'm here today to introduce our keynote speaker. She's actually been with us since this morning. She did a really nice job with the students this morning. It's Katie Pratt. She is a fourth-generation farmer. She lives on the farm with her husband. She said she raises kids, cows, corn, and beans. I'm sure you'll hear stories about her two children because she's a mom first. She does wonders with advocating for agriculture, which is what we need more of. She told her story this morning to our FFA members, and I think it's a great story to be heard. She is an Ag in the Classroom Coordinator, and she's on many boards, and I know sometimes she probably has a hard time saying no. Our paths have crossed through the FFA. I've known her sister who was a teacher, her brother. There are 3 past state officers in her family, so I think that her kids have something to look forward to. So we are very thankful that she's spending the day with us. So, Katie.
Well, thank you all very much. Yes, I have sucker tattooed on my forehead, but I don't mind saying yes to things like this, especially if I get to spend a day with Blue Jackets. I love Blue Jackets. It's inspiring to be around y'all, and you did great. First group don't talk to the third group, or third group don't talk to the first group because they had more rules on their bridge building, and it was a lot more difficult than what the first group had to deal with. No talking in the bus ride on the way home. So yeah, I'm a farm girl. Kara said kids, cows, corn, and beans. The cows is a wishful thinking part. I grew up on a livestock farm. We had cows. I showed cows. My dad still has a small cow-calf herd today. Grew up with pigs, lots and lots of pigs, farrow to finish operation. My husband has a different view of livestock. He's a grain farmer, and his view is that when that corn gets in the bin at the end of harvest, it's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to run away. It's not going to break down any fences. In the winter, when it's negative 20, there's no water that has to be thawed. There's no stomping out there in a blizzard to feed the animals. So yeah, cows, we've had a couple 4-H projects. Both kids are now in 4-H, and they're begging for animals. I'm like, you go, keep asking your dad. We can do this. So we have a 4-H shed that recently got built, and this spring, if you remember how wet it was, and my farmer, like the to-do list went away, and then pretty soon the honey-do list got all completed, and pretty soon he's like, oh, I guess maybe I'll go build that fence. Oh, yes. So Mother Nature's on my side. So now we have a fence for 4-H projects, so maybe one day we'll get them. You know, it's really awesome to be around a group of people who are willing to honor the history on which agriculture is based. And the Illinois Farm Bureau is celebrating their 100th anniversary this year. Several county farm bureaus have been celebrating as well. So it's been really fun to follow what people are discovering about the agriculture history within their own counties and their own communities. And to find out just what you probably didn't know and why things are the way they are. When our county, we celebrated last year, when our 100th committee was going through some of the archives, they found several interesting articles, but one of which they forwarded on to me. And it was published in July of 1951 in the Illinois Farm Bureau newspaper. The headline was How Farm Bureau Looks to Me. It was an interview that they did with Albert Kurz, who was at the time retiring as the 22nd president of the Illinois Association FFA. And so the gist of the interview was, what does an 18-year-old guy who's headed back to the farm, who just spent this year on the road wearing the blue jacket, what does he have to say about Farm Bureau and agriculture? So it was an interesting interview to read, but it was the last question, and it was his answer that stuck with me the most. The question was, what are Farm Bureau's responsibilities in telling the farmer's story to the public? And his answer was this. Such an organization should tell the public that the farmer is not to blame for high food costs. Farmers have to pay high prices for machinery, for steel, for labor. I believe that we farmers should spend money to tell our story to the public, but maybe not too much. It's a hard story to tell. The individual farmer can do a lot of good by personal contact. In my traveling around the country by bus and train while I was the state FFA president, I got to talking to a lot of city people. You'd be surprised to find out how little they know about farm life. That was 1951. 65 years ago, farmers were talking about the need to share the farm story. And today, unless you've lived under a rock and you don't read any ag publications and you don't have conversations at the coffee shop, you know the necessity for us to step forward and share our farm food story is beyond important. It's necessary. It's part of our business plan. Wearing the hat of an advocate for agriculture is just part of what we have to do today as farmers and as agriculture supporters. And so it's great to see an organization like DAAHA that's so invested in supporting the history, but also then encouraging the innovation, because agriculture innovation is where it's at. That's the only way we're going to be able to move forward in feeding 9 billion people by the year 2045. 4 years ago is when I think I really started paying attention to what this movement was to share our farm story. I participated in the discussion meet with the Illinois Farm Bureau and was lucky enough that the annual Farm Bureau meeting was in Hawaii that year. Yeah, so scored a trip to Hawaii, participated there, made it all the way to the Final Four. It was an amazing experience, but the funny thing was is that after that I discovered people thought then I knew everything. And so I was asked to come and speak at a lot of places and talk a lot about sharing our farm story. I was really nervous about that, so when the opportunity came to head to Chicago for some training, I jumped on that. It was conversational leaders training, and my husband thought that was pretty darn funny. You're going to go spend 3 days to learn how to talk. Yes, I am. And so we did. There were 15 other farmers, ranchers from around the state. I've told this story many times, but it's so indicative of where this conversation needs to start. We spent a day learning how to tell our farm story. What words should you use? Because we farmers use a different language when we're talking to each other. We speak in numbers, we speak in statistics. That doesn't resonate with our consumers, with people who are not familiar with agriculture. So we learned how to craft our message, and then we were going to be put to the test and have breakfast with foodie bloggers, so that's people who like to write about food, and just have breakfast with them, have a conversation. They got to answer questions of farmers and ranchers, and we got to ask questions of them. I thought the conversation was going great. I really did. The guy at our table, the food blogger, he was a fascinating person. He was the editor of God knows how many online food publications. He had traveled the world. He'd been involved in so many restaurant startups. He had so much to offer to the conversation. Breakfast was served, there was a pause, and he leans across the table and he says to me, "You do know that corn is evil, right?" I think I may have choked on my scrambled eggs. Nothing had prepared me for that. And unfortunately, we learned very quickly that the conversations at the other tables were headed in that same direction. And it came to light when, very vocally, the foodie blogger sitting about kitty corner from us threw her hands in the air and said, "Technology has no place in agriculture." And I found it amusing because she had this amazing camera sitting on the table with her, a phone in one hand and a tablet on the table as well. But by God, technology has no place in agriculture. None. The breakfast disintegrated into, it was pretty awful. There were personal attacks. The way you look is because of the way you farm, you feed your children, that type of thing. It was kind of dramatic, and I know that I left there thinking, okay, I got a full life, I have sucker tattooed on my head, I can't deal with this. I'm not going to take a role in this conversation. Now the good news is that some of those farmers had a different attitude, and they kept in touch with this particular blogger. Her name was Ellen. And in talking with her, in having a conversation, in listening, and FFAers, we talked about the importance of listening, they discovered that Ellen really wasn't all that adamant. She just didn't know any better. Our lens of knowledge colors what we see in the world, and not all of us have the same experience or the same knowledge base. Why do we expect somebody to understand what it is we do on a farm if they've never had an opportunity to be on a farm? That's not their fault. That's just the life experience that they had. Ellen today has become one of farm and agriculture's greatest supporters. She really has. She speaks at a lot of different agriculture meetings. She talks about what it is to make connections with farmers and consumers. It was a pretty exciting reversal having sat in that room that day. So this is my personal opinion, and it's based on personal observation. So much of what we call this conversation, this farm food dialogue today, it's a movement about our memories. Ellen's initial fear of what a modern farm didn't jive with the memories she had of heading out to her grandparents' farm when she was little. My farm princess, that would be my daughter, she asks me all the time, tell me a story about when you were a kid, Mom. And so I'll start talking, oh, well, we had to walk beans with Grandpa. Gosh, that was fun. Baling hay in July, 100 degrees. Oh, yeah. Cleaning out the stalls with my sister. That was great. Moving pigs when they get loose and you have to chase them in the garden. Weeding the garden. Oh, 5 a.m. so we could beat the heat of the day. Good times, good times. But you know, folks, those are not the memories that are driving us. It's more of those hazy, nostalgic scenes that we have of lemonade on the front porch swing, or maybe straw hats on Grandpa's head, or picking blackberries in the back patch. Very Tom Sawyer, Huck Finn, Laura Ingalls Wilder-ish memories. You read Laura Ingalls Wilder? I'm thinking of the book The Long Winter, where they moved to town and lived in a room next to a fireplace just so they could stay warm. And by the time the winter was over, they were eating unleavened bread and potatoes. Good times, good times. The whole crux of the questions that people have about farming are based on what they remember. And the idea that we have tractors that can drive themselves now, it's very sci-fi-ish. It's kind of scary to them. When ag organizations have discovered is that more people know about their farm and their farm family, the more they know about agriculture, and the more likely they are to support us in our endeavors to move forward in producing food, fiber, and fuel for the future. One of the first blogger dinners that I ever attended was in New York City, and the first question I got right out of the gate, you introduce yourself as an Illinois corn farmer, you know where that conversation's going to go. So listen, does Monsanto make you plant those awful GMOs? Sorry. Yep, it is what it is. You know it. Does Monsanto make you plant those awful GMOs? Well, no, and GMOs are a tool, and we found they're useful on our farm, but maybe not on everybody's farm. And after I got talking, she sat back in the booth and she went, really? Well, that just doesn't sound like that's big of a deal. Really? You don't say. It was that one-on-one connection that we made, that conversation that we had. It wasn't on a computer screen. It wasn't in a big room in a panel discussion. It was me and her talking as moms. She got the answer from a farmer, and she felt better about her food supply. The thing is, as I said before, what we don't understand can be scary. And these days, society's understanding of farms and food is practically non-existent. We are bombarded by marketing images of red barns and old silos, country sunsets and sunrises, the cows on the pasture, the families working together, wheat waving in the breeze. And while that is our reality, because sometimes I struggle with that, that's my reality. That's this amazing life that I get to live. The picture really doesn't communicate the full breadth of agriculture, the innovation of it. It's science and genetics that make the wheat wave in the breeze and not fall flat. It's a properly managed pasture that provides nutrition for our cows. The families working together requires an immense amount of business and communication skills. Immense amount. We farm with my husband's family, and I love them dearly, but communication is key. is it ever? It doesn't communicate that farms were sustainable before sustainable was a buzzword. And quite frankly, I would say this: if my grandfather was just concerned about being sustainable, I would not be farming today. Farmers are concerned about improvement. To sustain is to maintain. And we don't want to stay the same. We can't stay the same. We can't afford to do what we did before. We have to be better at it, better than we were yesterday. You know, my kids' farm experiences and memories are shaping up to be different, much different from mine. The only tractor my dad and grandpa ever let me drive was the Super M. And they only let me drive it to break my cattle to lead. I'd tie the cattle to a hay rack, and I'd just go round and around and around the yard until those cattle stopped pulling on the lead ropes. My sister would sunbathe on the hay rack as I did this. She said to me, "That's why I show horses." So anyway, and to which I said that when we graduated from college, I'm done. How about you? I got bills, still bills. Anyway, the Super M tractor for me was that. I was able to break my cattle to lead, but it was so much more on our farm. It hauled the hay wagon, it hauled the water tank out to the pasture, you know, it hauled wagons and kids as well. On that open cabbed, no seat belt, no safety switch, no GPS tractor. Now, my farm boy developed a love affair with tractors early on. In fact, I truly believe the boy was born from the womb farming. Like, he's just not going to be anything else. And if he is, it's going to crush his dad and his grandpa, I'll tell you that much. I don't even think Ethan could walk yet when he picked up a toy tractor. And of course, when you drive a toy tractor, it has to make noise. And so the first 3 years of his life, my soundtrack was, and then when his dad would play with them, big boys, you know, you have to make a noise if you're going to drive a tractor, right? When he was maybe 3 years old, if there was a tractor sitting in our yard, in our farmyard, we would have to go out and sit in it. Yay. And so we would go out and sit in the Caterpillar tractor that was our tillage tractor. And he would sit in the driver's seat and say, "Mama, this lever goes, and that button goes, and this one goes, and we would sit there for hours and hours and hours. Well, a few years ago, we switched out our tillage tractor from the Caterpillar to a John Deere track. And the day that cat rolled out of the drive, my farm boy came home just a little bit somber and a little teary-eyed. It makes me too when I think about it. I said, "Bubba, what's the matter?" "My first favorite tractor left the farm today." His first favorite tractor. My kids are making memories on the farm just like I'm making memories, except the memories that they're making involves a tractor that drives itself. It has a refrigerator underneath the seat where Uncle Peter can store his candy. It's got a buddy seat where their cousins can sit when they're driving. It's mind-boggling to think where my farm boy will be farming 20 years from now, really. The innovation that is coming is amazing, and it's the future that's going to give us that. Ladies and gentlemen, while the good old days always look good, and it's important for us to keep them in mind, we must start talking about what the good old days are right now. Because in order to do that, that will secure our future. Memories are not going to feed the world, but innovative agriculture most definitely will. Thank you all for your time.
Thanks for listening. I'll be back next week with another edition of DeKalb County Life Online. If you have suggestions for future programs on Internet Radio, send me an email at barry815@sbcglobal.net. That email address again is barry815@sbcglobal.net. This is Barry Schrader saying until next time, have a good week.